The defense took it to the offense in the first padded practice for the Seahawks. What did the offense have in store for a bit of revenge on the practice field on Tuesday? We'll be breaking it all down in our latest edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, whether you're listening from West Seattle or over in Athens, Georgia. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks had their sixth training camp practice this afternoon at the VMAC, their second straight padded practice. The offense looking to get even after being dominated yesterday. Were they able to accomplish it? We'll be diving into that and other key takeaways coming out of the sixth training camp practice. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. With the padded practices returning on Monday, the defense did what typically happens, and they came out ready to hit. It was a defensive-dominated practice. The offense didn't score a touchdown until Jake Bobo's fantastic reception towards the tail end of practice. Nearly a shutout for Mike Macdonald's defense in their first padded training camp practice. And while the offense didn't necessarily light up the scoreboard today, they scored 3 or 4 touchdowns in today's practice. There were certainly a lot more positives coming out of this particular practice. And we got to see Charles Cross, Rob, walking around after practice with the heavyweight champion belt over his shoulder. And why did he get heavyweight champion? Because he was anchoring an offensive line that came out with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder today after getting pushed around yesterday. And that was really the theme. The offense getting the win today, according to Coach Mike Macdonald, and Cross was at the center of it with this offensive line setting the tone and getting some push up front in the trenches.
Yeah, and isn't that the ideal scenario for the Seahawks at this point, Corbin? I mean, sure, you love the fact that Mike Macdonald's defense steals the show on the very first padded practice, but for Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff's offensive line to kind of seize back the control, I think is a perfect scenario. I mean, sure, it would have been exciting if Geno Smith and DK Metcalf or Jackson Smith and Jake Bobo, if they had just gone crazy like they were doing in some of the earlier practices where defensive backs essentially are, just kind of allowing receptions rather than truly competing. But instead, it was a return to the physical downhill run blocking that we're all hoping to see come back with and be a staple of Seahawk offensive football here. So as you said, Charles Cross carrying the heavyweight belt. For those folks out there who are kind of wondering what we're talking about here, that's one of the creative ideas that this new coaching staff has brought to the Seahawks, that they are every now and then going to be awarding individual players with championship belts, like you'd see in WWE or something like that. Charles Cross up there at the podium with the belt.
He
over
was the
his shoulder.
Undertaker today.
Exactly. And I think that is a perfect example of the type of tone that the Seahawks are trying to bring back. And I love that Mike Macdonald in his post-practice press conference gave Geno Smith some credit, basically just acknowledging that this is a coach's award, but at the same time, he asked his quarterback, who they thought that should be, presented with this award, because clearly the offense was the big winner. And you just love the leadership, the selflessness that your captain, your quarterback showed in giving it to one of the offensive linemen, and the fact that it's Charles Cross specifically, considering who he's going up against, like some of the better pass rushers the Seahawks have, including, of course, Uchenna Nwosu, who I know, in reading your report, sir, that Charles Cross, Uchenna Nwosu kind of locked horns a little bit, and that Cross did, he won those battles in today's sessions.
I think Charles Cross has been one of the best players in training camp so far, and that now includes 2 padded practices. He just looks like a different player. Is it the Scott Huff effect? Is it the fact that this kid was 21 when he came into the league, a young rookie, that maybe just now at 23, everything is going to really start clicking together? And of course, he's healthy. I think he played last year with that toe injury bothering him for much of the season. There's a lot of different factors there, but in the run game session, the team run session, which being a former running back, that was always what I got excited about because it's catered to the run game. The defense knows the run game is coming. And for a good chunk of that period, it didn't matter, especially when the Seahawks were running to the left side where Charles Cross was taking care of business over there. Seattle had back-to-back 30-plus yard runs, one by Ken Walker III and one by Zach Charbonnet that both were to the left side. Ken Walker III was following behind Charles Cross, who drove his defensive end out of the picture. I believe Nwosu was actually the player there, drove him off the ball, which does not happen very often. And then the next play, it was a cutback off of Zach Charbonnet, or by Zach Charbonnet, a cutback that was off of Charles Cross's block. And then Charbonnet made a lot of his yardage with a really nice juke on Tyrell Dodson and got free and ended up scampering for big yardage to the delight of the crowd on the berm. And so Charles Cross, salute to him for the run blocking, but also in one-on-ones, which I think are a really good litmus test for where you are at as a blocker when you are on an island. That he was going against Uchenna Nwosu. The first play completely stonewalled a bull rush attempt. I mean, he turned into the Great Wall of China there. There was nobody going through that. And then the next snap, Uchenna Nwosu loses his footing when he's trying to do a power rip past him, in large part because Charles Cross got his hands on him quick. It just feels like we are watching a different player. And then you got Christian Haynes playing left guard today, not his native right guard position, with Laken Tomlinson getting a veteran rest day, and he was getting after it. And maybe the thing that I love the most, Rob, we've talked about this football team needing some spark along the offensive line. They need some ornery guys, some angry guys that can get after it. Second straight practice that we've seen Christian Haynes have to be pulled away from a defensive player afterwards, because this dude is bringing that orneriness and that chippiness and that physicality, and the running backs have to love that. So Tomlinson's your guy there right now, but maybe there's still a pathway to Anthony Bradford and Christian Haynes playing together at the 2 guard spots, which would certainly give you a lot of beef at those positions.
It would give you a lot of beef. It would give you a lot of youth, and it give you a lot of physicality and aggression, to your point that you just made there. And so, I think that Seattle signing Laken Tomlinson, to me, was an underrated move nationally. We talked about it a lot. I think that it just added a veteran presence that frankly, I thought that the Seahawks needed at that left guard position. But ideally, you'd love for the young players to just seize that spot. So Christian Haynes excelling in his first opportunity at left guard for the Seahawks, to me, is very, very exciting news. And as you mentioned before, as far as Anthony Bradford and certainly, with Charles Cross at the left tackle position, just both of them playing with the physicality that the Seahawks need to again, be a dominant running team again. But, Corbin, as a former offensive line, former offensive lineman myself, former offensive line coach myself, and you as a former running back, obviously we're always going to love just gushing about the running game. But I want to switch the gear a little bit and talk about some other players on offense. And DK Metcalf, a day after Jake Bobo makes his terrific Superman reception, DK Metcalf sounds like he had some pretty spectacular receptions, including a one-handed touchdown today, it sounded like.
This is really the debate now among reporters on the sideline. And it initially was leaning towards Jake Bobo, but the more reporters I talked to, it's near a 50-50 now. And I was just on Fox 13 Seattle and got to hear Aaron Levine and Curtis Crabtree. They were on different ends of the spectrum too. One of them was like, well, DK Metcalf had an even better catch. And the other one, I'm still siding with Bobo. I'm personally still going with Jake Bobo. I think the level of difficulty was higher for his catch yesterday, but Metcalf made a spectacular one-handed grab. And the fact that he had Devin Witherspoon all over him on that play made it that much better that he was able to corral that football with his right hand, get both feet down in bounds. It was still a spectacular catch. Those are two of the best receptions. They might be the top two receptions that I have seen at Seahawks training camp. And it's weird that they happen literally in a 24-hour period at the VMAC. And Metcalf really had a strong day. Getting to see him and Reek Woolen get after each other. That is kind of the Christian Haynes equivalent now in the secondary, where you're seeing these two competitors. As Mike McDonald said, it's iron sharpening iron. And that was a lot of fun to see today.
Well, and again, it's kind of like we just talked about, that you want to see the offense rebound after, arguably a disappointing performance. Again, all credit to the defense yesterday, but you want to see the offense rebound. And in a similar way, when an undrafted free agent like Jake Bobo makes arguably the greatest catch, in recent Seahawk history at training camp, you want to see your superstar DK Metcalf step up as well. And for him to do that one day later against the best corner on the team, I think, again, it's just very exciting development for the Seahawks that there are some young leaders, not just young talented players, but young leaders developing for this squad as well.
When we come back, we've got more takeaways to dive into from day 6, the second padded practice for the Seahawks. Going to get plenty of defensive talk coming up next here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Game Time. You shouldn't have to skip a car payment to buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, and comedy near you, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Back in early May, my wife and I scored awesome lower bowl seats to see the metal gods themselves, Judas Priest, Rob Halford and company, for just $75 a ticket. And we enjoyed the chance to see the iconic band up close and personal without breaking the bank or breaking the law. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price to write your own memories. If you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks hosting their 6th training camp practice today at the VMAC, their second straight day with pads on. Today, it was everybody in full pads. On Monday, there were some players that didn't have their thigh pads in. I think it was a by choice thing, more of a skeleton type thing. Today, everybody had their pants with the pads in it. They were ready to roll, and plenty of hard hitting out there on the VMAC practice field. Let's talk some defense now, shall we, Rob? And I want to go to Reek Woolen, who we kind of just had a perfect segue there with DK Metcalf, because I think that both these things happened today. DK Metcalf had the best day he's had in training camp so far. The touchdown, had a 30-yard crossing route that he caught, and a couple other receptions, and just he's really bringing it with the intense competition against the corners. But on the other side, Reek Woolen has really answered the call for some of the people out there that were saying, hey, I need to see rookie Reek Woolen. I'm seeing a better player than we saw rookie Reek Woolen right now. And the reason why I think that we're seeing a better player, he's just really stepped up his physicality, and you're seeing more of a competitor coming out of him. I think he was competitive as a rookie, but you're seeing him more. He's showing it more with his body language and just the way he's playing the game right now. And we saw him not back down from Metcalf yesterday when Metcalf came after him post-snap on one of those plays. He did not back down today. Had a couple of really nice pass breakups in coverage against DK Metcalf. So you are seeing both of these guys who both have the skills to be superstars in this league, but they're not quite there yet. They are putting each other to the test day in, day out, and that is only going to increase the odds that these two guys can reach both their respective potentials that are through the sky, through the clouds, for two extremely talented players.
No, exactly. And, as you said, as Mike McDonald said, iron sharpens iron. And so I'm going to kind of bounce off of that and go to the other side of the cornerback position, and that being Devin Witherspoon. And as you mentioned a moment ago, DK Metcalf had that touchdown reception with Witherspoon on him. Witherspoon, of course, a year ago primarily played out of the slot. And so the fact that Devin Witherspoon is now playing more outside, to me, that is and one of the most exciting things about Devin Witherspoon is that positional versatility, is the instincts. And one of the things that excites me the most about Mike McDonald is the fact that he has opponents basically guessing who is going to blitz, what they're going to do. And if you know that Devin Witherspoon is going to be lined up at the nickel or slot position, then you kind of know.
And it looks like Rob may have froze on me. I will get Rob back here in a moment. For those of you listening, everybody needs to understand, both of us are on the road right now.
On the defensive line as well. And so that is one of the things that I really appreciate about this aspect of it, is that as excited as we might be about the cornerback play, I think that we've got to shift our attention back to the line of scrimmage. And so some of the plays that we saw or that you saw and that I've read about, to be very upfront about it, but that we saw from Byron Murphy II today, and some of the pass rush ability being unleashed. And granted, it was against Nick Harris in some opportunities, Christian Haynes or Anthony Bradford and others, but still the point is that you're starting to see some of the flashy athletic ability, the explosiveness from Seattle's prize rookie starting to show through.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out Byron Murphy, because he kind of got off to a quiet start in this training camp. But I think some of it is there are certain guys that just aren't going to look the same when they don't have the pads on. And you can see when the pads came on yesterday that Byron Murphy II elevated his game, because now he can pop people. He can take advantage of his power. And Nick Harris is a solid center in the NFL. There are a few teams he could probably compete to start for, and he bulldozed him into the backfield. The poor coach that was back there playing quarterback, I've never seen him get, have like a face of fear. That was the first time I've ever seen it, because, oh my gosh, I got these two big guys coming at me that fast, because Byron Murphy II put Nick Harris on skis and just drove him back. And it was really impressive. And I want to stay on the defensive line, because one of the players that I think unfairly was getting criticized for his rookie season, in the sense that, the production, Derek Hall was not productive. You got 11 quarterback pressures from him last year. But when I went back a month ago and I was starting to look at some of the games last year, it felt like you saw flashes where the athleticism, the tenacity, the motor for Derek Hall was showing up. And he seemed like a player that the previous coaching staff, for whatever reason, they struggled to figure out what to do with him last year. Mike McDonald is not going to be in that boat. Adin Durde is certainly not going to be in that boat. And I can tell you, at least from McDonald's perspective, the Baltimore Ravens were very interested in Derek Hall in the draft 2 years ago, and the Seahawks ended up taking him. So Mike McDonald clearly had intel on him. He was heavily involved in that process, which defensive players they wanted to bring in. So Derek Hall now, we are seeing that playmaking ability. He had a really nice tackle for loss today, a couple of pressures. I feel like he's getting to the quarterback 2 or 3 times minimum every single practice. He's doing well in the one-on-one drills. You're seeing the power that he plays with, really thick lower body that he is now using. He just looks like a much more confident player. And as his teammate Lieutenant Nwosu said today, he is playing hungry. It is showing on the field. If you can get a leap like Boye Mafe had last year, you might not get the production because the snaps aren't going to be there necessarily. But if you can have that kind of a jump from Derek Hall as a pass rusher and a run defender, his run defense has arguably been even better in terms of the growth that he's had here. If you can get that kind of production out of him, that could be a key component to this defense going from being 25th to middle of the pack, maybe even flirting with the top 10, because that edge position would have much better depth.
Yeah, and that's I love that you just mentioned some numbers there. It could be top 15, could be top 10 even. That's where I felt like Rayshawn Jenkins in an interview that you did a couple of days ago, that he wanted to say this could be a top 10 defense, and of course didn't actually say it. But if the Seahawks are going to make that type of a massive leap, then I think it is going to have to be, on the back of a player like a Derek Hall. And that, again, to me, is what is most encouraging about all of this. We're not talking about some veteran free agent who has come in and has changed the Seahawks. These are their own young drafted players who are just seizing this opportunity, and they're doing it with physicality. And so, again, to me, that is the most encouraging news. I don't care if the Seahawks score 70 touchdowns, in a training camp practice. None of that stuff matters because it's all kind of manufactured. Where are you located? What are you trying to do? What actually wins football games in the fall is the physicality that you show here in the summer. And whether it be DK Metcalf, whether it be Charles Cross, whether it be Reek Woolen, and whether it be Derek Hall, it's physicality that is shining through at this point.
And I want to give a shout out to one other player before we move on to our last segment, who I've used this term with Mike Jackson a few times. And there's a few other players. I think Miles Adams could be called a cockroach too. That is not a negative term. Like, that means you are pesky. You are going to always be in the hunt for a roster spot. And maybe some people doubt you, but you don't go away. Artie Burns is now squarely in that category for me. Last year, you've talked about this in the show before. He played so well at the end of the preseason that it felt like that's really what vaulted him on the roster. And what was really intriguing about that is that he started showing he could play in the nickel late in the preseason. And I think that's what got him on the roster. We didn't think he could play that position. He had, I think, 42 slot snaps his entire career before last year. He had been exclusively a boundary cornerback. And he has proven that was not a fluke last year when he played over 200 snaps in the slot, didn't give up any touchdowns. He has been fantastic in camp. He had an amazing pass breakup today on Jackson Smith-Njigba in the end zone, playing in the slot. He was playing in the slot in the first team defense while Devin Witherspoon was sliding out, and Trey Brown and Mike Jackson were playing on the outside with the twos. So they're doing some mixing and matching here. And it looks to me like the Seahawks want to take a closer look. And if Artie Burns keeps producing the way that he has, he had a pick earlier in camp. He's had a boatload of pass deflections in this camp. He is just practice after practice stacking really good days. Mike Macdonald is going to give you playing time because he is looking for the best players he can get his hands on. And if Artie Burns is one of those guys, then Artie Burns is going to play. So I want to give him a shout out because I think that he has done a fantastic job so far. And he's a guy that I was sleeping on going into this because I thought you drafted two corners. Very unlikely he's going to make the team. But if he's playing well in the nickel, DJ James been hurt most of camp. Hey, Artie Burns very much is in the position to win a roster spot again this year when a lot of people were thinking that he wasn't going to be in the mix. So good for him. We'll see if he keeps it up, but certainly a player that is bolstering his stock. When we come back, Rob and I are going to be dishing out some surprises, both positive and negative, that we've seen so far from the Seahawks in the first 6 days of training camp. We'll get to that here in a moment on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 win or lose. Who will lead the U.S. men's basketball team in scoring? Is Byron Murphy II going to be a frontrunner to win Defensive Rookie of the Year? Can Aaron Judge get to 60-plus home runs for the second time in 3 years for the Yankees? You can bet on it all in an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com and add a big win to your summer bucket list today. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, Tuesday edition. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. Thank you, as always. We greatly appreciate you taking the time to make Locked On Seahawks your first listen. 5 days a week. The Seahawks are now 6 practices into training camp. They had their second padded practice today. We've got a little over a week's worth now of practices that we can really comb over. And with the padded practices now being here, Rob, we get a chance to really see where the cream of the crop is. Who is going to rise to the occasion when real football returns? And keeping that in mind, I think it's time for our first status check here with some surprises, some players that have been surprising here in the early going in camp. And it can be both positive and negative. Sometimes there are bad surprises. And every training camp, it feels like you're going to have some like that. So, Rob, I know that we talked about one player in particular earlier who is going to top the list for you on offense that got his first left guard action today for the Seahawks.
Yeah, and that is surprising, just considering the fact that, again, you had the veteran Laken Tomlinson, who Mike McDonald, said after practice today that he just got a Veterans Day off. There's no injury type of situations there, but I and many other draft analysts, we kind of focused in on the fact that virtually every single start that Christian Haynes had at University of Connecticut was at that right guard position. When it goes to the Senior Bowl, he played exclusively at the right guard position. So to have Christian Haynes' first quote unquote starting opportunity, in training camp for the Seahawks, for it to be at left guard is a little bit of a surprise. Now, it's not a stunner. I was fortunate enough to be able to have an interview with Jim Moore Jr. and KJR 93.3 during the draft itself. And he told us that, like a lot of other clubs, that they would use their offensive linemen, whether they started one position, they would rotate them throughout practice. So Christian Haynes has some experience at left guard, but still, that is a surprise. It's a pleasant surprise that Christian Haynes not only did play that the Seahawks feel comfortable enough to allow him to do it, and that he excelled, it sounded like, when he got that opportunity today also.
Yeah, he was impressive. I want to stay on the offensive line with this year's rookie class. And I will admit, at the beginning of training camp, I was wondering just where Mike Jarrell was going to fit into the equation here, because a Division II prospect at Findlay University hadn't played this kind of competition before, maybe not quite as big as he needs to be at this point. We know the athletic traits. I just didn't know what to expect when the pads came out. And really in OTAs and minicamp, he was kind of, he was third, fourth string at the tackle position. And yet, I don't know that there has been a bigger surprise on the positive end of the spectrum for me, especially these first 2 padded practices. Yesterday, we got to see him lock down Boye Mafe in one-on-ones, not once, but twice in a row. And then today, he had 5 reps in one-on-ones. And again, this is some subjectivity, but I had him with 4 wins in those 5, and he actually had a really good rep against Derek Hall. He lost the other one to him, but that is the type of stuff that we are seeing now, 2 practices in a row. If Mike Jarrell is able to technically be able to play against these NFL players at that kind of a level right now, when he's still trying to get his feet underneath him, you might have yourself a really intriguing prospect. And I will go this far. This is not an era now where stashing players is usually an issue on the practice squad, unless you're a tackle. If you are a really good tackle with potential, everybody's looking for him. So if Mike Jarrell keeps playing the way that he has and looking the way he has, and he does that into the preseason, Seattle might have to keep him on the roster if they don't want to lose him, because I would fear that this would be a guy with his athletic traits that other teams would be looking to pluck him off of waivers very quickly. That is not something we see a lot now with the expanded practice squads. But if there's a position you're going to see it, it's that tackle spot, where finding big guys that are quality players that can get the job done, it's difficult. It's easier said than done.
And it really is. I'm wearing my BC Lions, shirt as kind of a testament to that I'm on the road now scouting the 5 different NFL teams that are holding their training camps around the Los Angeles area. And there is an awful lot of those 5 clubs, Corbin, who have invested early draft picks in offensive linemen who have struggled at times. And so that's very encouraging news for Mike Jarrell. I'm going to switch here because, as you said, sometimes surprises are good and sometimes they're not so good. And so I'm ecstatic about the development so far from Mike Jarrell, but I am disappointed in a player that the Seahawks selected a year ago, and that being the running back Kenny McIntosh. I still have not heard the breakout performance from Kenny McIntosh that I was expecting. I had him as one of the top 10 running backs in last year, 2 years ago now, the 2023 draft class. And I really thought that he was going to be a player that should be able to be Seattle's clear number 3 back. And again, I'm not expecting him to push Ken Walker or Zach Charbonnet, but still, I did think that there was a very clear and distinct 1, 2, 3 in Seattle's running backfield. And that doesn't sound like that's been the case. McIntosh sounds like has made some plays, but that there's some other backs that have been performing at least as well. And so that is a little bit of a surprise to me on more of a negative slant.
Yeah, and I try not to, from a surprise standpoint, the last thing you want to do in training camp, you don't want to pile it on guys. I don't want to say that this is necessarily a surprise for one of these players. D. Eskridge just has not gotten the job done. And there was part of me that was hoping new coaching staff, new offense, he's healthy. Are we going to see D. Eskridge rise to the occasion? And there's been some plays in these first 6 practices. He's made a few catches, but he's getting a lot of reps with the third-team offense at this point. And that usually tells you all you need to know, where the coaching staff has him at. And then you add in the fact that Jarick Young had a really big day today. Young made a couple really nice grabs downfield. We know his special teams ability. Laviska Shenault. Jake Bobo is a lock for this roster. I mean, you're getting plays from Cody White. He has been a bigger impact player in practice than what D. Eskridge has been. So at this point, are we now to the point where it's time to cut ties? It feels like it is trending that way. He has got to elevate his game or really just show he's the best kick returner. That's really the only way I see right now him making this roster. And the other player here, Stone Forsythe. I just mentioned Mike Jarrell, how good he looks. Forsythe has had a really rough first 6 practices, especially these 2 padded practices. He has been dominated in most of the one-on-one reps. He has struggled in the team sessions, and he has been working with the third-team offensive line most of the time. It feels like this new coaching staff with Scott Huff and company, it feels like they're already starting to look to some of the younger guys here and say, this is who we're going to build around here. Now, does he have time to rebound? Sure. Abe Lucas being out also would help him. If Lucas is not available, he's an experienced player, but it does feel like he has not been able to capitalize on the reps, and there's already some writing on the wall here for Stone Forsythe.
Yeah, again, that very disappointing news. And the positive about this is, of course, and I was reminded of this by a pro personnel director today, that when it comes to offensive tackles and it comes to inside linebackers, that you really can't gauge much of anything until you get to the preseason games. Perhaps that will be the case for a certain return guy and D. Eskridge, and perhaps a running back in Kenny McIntosh that we mentioned as well. So the positive is that there's still plenty of time to change the direction, but the trajectory right now of the players that we just talked about here sounds like they're going to have to fix things if they want to make sure that they make the Seahawks 53.
I'd be remiss not to mention a defensive player because this entire conversation has been about offense, but there haven't really been any negative surprises on the defensive side of the ball. I would say Tyrell Dodson, though, he has really been way better than I anticipated, at least these first couple padded practices. The instincts, the coverage ability, dropping back, hasn't had a pass breakup, but he just looks more fluid than I expected to see. Moving into his responsibilities in zone coverage, manning up, how instinctive he is. So that is a player who I kind of had held back expectations is maybe the best way to put it, where I was like guarded. I'm not sure what we're going to see. I've been really impressed by what I've seen from him so far on the defensive side of the football. And I think that bodes extremely well for Seattle's defense. If he ends up being a really good middle linebacker for them, that's a guy that could be a rare midseason extension for John Schneider.
No question about it. I mean, and that's exactly what the Seahawks need. Because, again, 31st ranked defense, we talked about it so many times. Dodson impressed me on tape in Buffalo, and I'm eager to see him kind of continue the physical play that led to him being, at least by some, ranked among the absolute best linebackers in the NFL a year ago.
As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Ring. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. As we promised for today's show, there is going to be another interview coming up tomorrow, and he's a familiar name, a guy that has caught a few highlight reel passes since coming to the Seahawks last year as an undrafted rookie. Jake Bobo will be stopping by from training camp for Locked On Seahawks. We will have that on tomorrow's show. Make sure you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Go Hawks.